individual seems to himself ever to be working against himself. What he longs for is the energy that comes from a concentration of his forces in a single direction toward a single end. Often this is impossible of achievement because of many factors. It may be that a person has so many gifts of such high order that the pull in many directions is authentic and convincing. It may be that the goal that beckons is one requiring the kind of preparation that is impossible of fulfillment because of circumstances that will not yield to the intent, however compelling the intent may be. Perhaps what the dream is set upon offers no precedent in his own story, thereby rendering null and void the confidence, even the effort itself. Or it may be that a man has turned his back upon the vision that gripped him and accepted in its place something that fell within the easy reach of untaxed powers. There is still another dimension in which a man may be a victim of cross purposes. He may be set in his life's commitment with a personal equipment and discipline equal to his choice, but he feels under pressure to include in his activity additional duties that are compelling in themselves, but are apart from the meaning of his commitment. At such a time, a decision must be reached that will enable him to say, this one thing I do, this one way I take, this one commitment I honor. To take such a stand may mean being bitterly judged and grossly misinterpreted. It may mean a loss of prestige and a shattering of ties that bind into the lives of many others. There is always the possibility that he may be mistaken, the victim of pride, of arrogance, of conceit. Lurking ever in the background is the threat that one has taken the easier way out. One is doing the convenient and less costly thing. At long last, the only redemption from the paralysis of the cross purpose is to seek with all possible intent to link one's deepest desire with one's choice of goal, and to make of one's life a dedication to such an end. Ultimately, a man's responsibility is to God. The God a man worships is the God he must face. And when he stands before him, what will he say? He comes to us as one unknown, without a name, as he came to the men by the lakeside who knew him not. He speaks to us. He commands, follow me. And to those who obey him, he will reveal himself in the toils and the sufferings, in the joys through which they shall pass in his fellowship. And as an ineffable mystery, they shall learn in their own experience who he is. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my Redeemer. Amen. As a background for our thought, excuse me, I'm reading 2 paragraphs from the writing of a South African novelist. I have sometimes thought it would be a terrible thing if, when death came to a man or a woman, there stood about his bed, reproaching him not for his sins, not for his crimes of commission and omission toward his fellow men, but for the thoughts and the visions that had come to him, and which he had thrust always into the background. And then when he is dying, they gather round him the things he might have incarnated and given life to and would not. All that might have lived and now must never live forever, look at him with their large, reproachful eyes, his own dead visions, reproaching him, saying, we came to you. You, only you, could have given us life. Now we are dead forever. Was it worth it? All the sense of duty you satisfied, the sense of necessity you labored under, should you not have violated it all and given us birth? It has come upon me so vividly sometimes that I've almost leaped out of bed to gain air, that suffocating sense that all his life long a man or a woman might live striving to do his duty, and then at the end find it all wrong. There are such absolutely conflicting ideals. The ideal of absolute submission and endurance of wrong towards oneself the ideal of noble resistance to all injustice and wrong, even when done to oneself, the ideal of the absolute devotion to the smaller, always present call of life, and the ideal of devotion to the larger aims, sweeping all before it. The agony of life is not the choice between good and evil. The agony of life is the choice between two evils or two goods. We continue our journey. Jesus and the tempter. Sometimes it seems that the necessities of our lives, certainly with reference to time available for our own study and meditation and reflection, particularly upon the life of the Master, cause us to separate in isolated units aspects of his life, as if these aspects or this aspect were the only and total story. I've often wondered why, in the services on Good Friday, for instance, the first part of the service should not be concerned with the birth of Jesus, the singing of Christmas carols, so that as one moves through all the unfolding of the matchless life, and one comes to the hill outside the city, there is continuity and wholeness. The tempter met him in our thought this morning at the crossroad, just outside the town of Jericho. The Master and his little knot of disciples were walking out of the city. And as they came to a fork in the road, one going north towards Jerusalem, the other going south towards Nazareth and Galilee, a strange thing happened. And it is the only place in all the records where there is a statement concerning this strange thing. You remember? As they approached the crossroads, Jesus apparently bolted ahead of the group. And it is recorded that when the disciples looked into his face, they were frightened. What did they see there? What kind of inner wrestling was so churning and tumultuous in its character and its depth and intensity that it spilled over into his countenance with such dramatic import that when those who had been with him all the time looked in his face, they were frightened at what they saw. Shall I go to Jerusalem, or shall I go back home? And the tempter talked with him. Or perhaps argued with him. It would be a wonderful thing to go back and to pick up the threads of the dynamic ministry of healing and teaching. What a wonderful prospect. With all the cumulative power of my experience of God as I sought to write large in the context of my movements, the meaning of his will and purpose in my life, and make of my life an utter contagion for the transmission of his will and purposes in the lives of others. What a wonderful thing to go back and establish myself as a great and good and holy teacher, healing the sick, I remember the time that I was walking along and I heard before I saw him the loud shrieks of the maniac. And as I made the turn in the road, I saw him standing there disheveled, his eyes like gutted candlelight, the bursted chains dangling from his hands and his arms and his legs, that dazed, terrible look of the mind in a tilted place, and something deep within me spoke to him. Who are you? What is your name? And for a moment, as a precursor of that which was taking place at some other region in his spirit, his mind balanced just for a second. And he said, "That is my trouble. I don't know who I am. There are so many of me, and they riot in my streets. If I knew who I am, I would be whole again." I remember that. how wonderful if I could spend all the years of my life multiplying redemption. It's multiplying. And what a comfort I would be to my mother. I would live and teach and heal and die in my own bed. But if I go to Jerusalem, where I would be on the receiving end of the cumulative rejection and emotional and official insecurity of those whose foundations were disturbed by the revelation of the God in me. Who knows what they might do to me? Who knows? It will mean my life, and not as some martyr, no, but it will mean my life because the only way they think by which they can protect themselves from the inroads of the judgment of God as articulate in me would be to kill me. And not because they had something against me personally. No, it is like the frog and the yeast cake seated on a park bench, and someone dropped water on the yeast cake, and the yeast cake began expanding and expanding and expanding, and the more it expanded, the more it crowded the frog. And finally, in desperation, the frog said, "Yeast cake, why don't you stop pushing me off the bench?" And the yeast cake said, "I'm not pushing you. I'm just growing." This will to eliminate, which I will experience if I go to Jerusalem, will be the first line of defense against the kind of disturbance and upheaval that the will of God makes manifest in me, who feels himself to be the living embodiment of the will of God. And I must be careful. I will teach if I go there, but every night my disciples and I will go out of the city in a quiet place and hide. I don't want to be assassinated in some dark corner. I want the witness here. And this is the point, of course, of Judas, isn't it? One of the points. Where is his hiding place? I will take you to it. How will we know him in the dark? I'll kiss him. And so he went to Jerusalem. How I wish I had been on that road outside of Jericho. To feel in his presence how under the impact of what took place there, all the shattered, differentiated fragmentation of my own life and resolves would be galvanized into one whole creative synthesis, so that even through my little, sorry, inadequate, and impoverished life, the great God might find a lung through which to breathe. I wish I had been there. Shall I go home? Shall I go to Jerusalem? The Messiah. When you have been at a crossroad of that quality, or that character, or that kind, or that intimation, however you say it, it doesn't matter. But when you have stood at such a crossroads in your limited way or my limited way, how did you vote? What did you do? Dost thou tire our Father of hearing from our stumbling lips the same monotonous cry of inadequacy, of limitation, of sin? Oh God, let us not weary thee, but out of all the long journey over which thou hast come with thy children, speak to our condition.
O Sabbath rest by Galilee, O calm of hills above, where Jesus knelt to share with thee the silence of eternity, interpreted by love. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my Redeemer.